Stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kathy, if you'd do roll call for us, please.
Councilmember Zerfing? Here. Councilmember Benson?
Here.
Councilmember Cramblett?
Here.
Councilmember Masters?
Yes.
Councilmember Pruitt?
Here.
Councilmember Haight?
Excuse.
And Mayor Fisher.
Here. Amendments to the agenda.
We won't be having the presentation.
We won't be having presentations, so that'll be skipped. And with that being, we'll go on to public hearing. We have none. Presentations, none. Comments from the public. Seeing as how we have no public, there'll be no comments. Next is discussion declaration of potential conflicts of interest.
I just want to make note, I don't know when it's appropriate too, that we're going to talk about law enforcement services. I work for Hood River County Sheriff's Office. So we're going to be talking about law enforcement services. So
It's under consent.
Oh, under consent.
Oh, wait,
Conflict, well, she's just,
no, it's down,
It's under
the
workshop.
workshop.
yeah, right.
So we're not making a vote, so it's not,
Just discussion.
yeah.
And
Pardon me?
and I don't, I wouldn't have a problem with her participating in the discussion because I don't think to me, it wouldn't pose a conflict.
Yeah.
We're not proposing to hire her.
Right. It doesn't
But
really
that's-
involve you
yeah.
per se, so you should be free to speak.
The ethics rule, as I understood it from the training I had, was that if you declare it as a potential conflict of interest, not necessarily an actual conflict, but a potential conflict, then legally, whether it's a conflict or not, you're allowed to participate in the discussion. If you don't declare it, then there's some sort of violation, if it turns out that there was a conflict. So just declaring it as potential allows participation in the discussion. And that's just League of Oregon Cities elected official training. I got that from.
Thank you. So next would be consent of agenda. Okay. Under the first item of consent of agenda is approval of minutes, March 14th, 2011 council meeting. Yes, Lance?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Lance Masters and seconded by Tom Cramlett.
Second be the bills too. Was
The
that just,
consent agenda, yeah.
okay, well, because you didn't tell what the amount
I'm
of the bills were too.
Consent agenda would be the minutes and also the ratification of bills in the amount of $1,992.42.
100,000,
What did I say?
1,000,
Oh, did I really?
yeah.
100,000.
He's always trying to save a buck.
$992.49. Anyway, so it's been moved by Lance and seconded by Tom. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? None. We will now go to unfinished business, and we have none. So next we will go to new business. Discuss revisions to the interim city administrator's Carson's contract.
Thank you. I'll do this one. It's not so much a revision as a new interpretation. Essentially, I was hired on a contract at a flat rate, which was $7,500 a month. After I was hired, the city attorney decided that I was not a contractor, I was an employee of the city. And as such, instead of a flat rate, money had to be taken out for Social Security, Medicare, unemployment, a portion of which by at least practice, the city has picked up. So the implication of that is that there's an additional $291.75 that will have to, would be added in addition to the $37.50. $37.50 is still paid. I pay state taxes, Social Security, that kind of thing, but there's this other component that the city's liable for that will increase how much we have to transfer at the end of, let's say, 4 months. So I just want to make a clarification on it. I went round and round with the city attorney on it, and I couldn't budge him off of his position, so that's where we are.
And it's $291.75 a month, the
Yes.
pay period?
I'm sorry, that would be paid twice a month. So it's, you're right.
Okay.
It's every 2 weeks, there's an additional $291.75.
And,
That's incurred by the city.
and I did ask that question on Saturday at our goal session, and it was basically because he doesn't bring his own equipment to use, and therefore he basically, where he's under our direction, he doesn't get to freelance and do his own thing, so therefore he has to be an employee, according to the attorney.
But the other component is Medicare, Social Security, which what is that?
Unemployment and workers' comp. So it's like Social Security, this is per pay period, which is every 2 weeks. Social Security is $232.50. Medicare is $54.38. Unemployment is $3.75, and workers' comp is $1.12. So that totals $291.75. And you could double that to get it for, well, we don't really do it by the month.
The Social Security component is the,
It's the portions the city picks up, not the portion I pick up. For Social Security, and I'm not sure where this formula comes from, but I pay half, the city pays half. For Medicare, I pay half, the city pays half. The city pays all of unemployment, and then for workers' comp, I pay half, and then.
that's the standard.
Right, and there's also, because I'm now an employee, there's also life insurance, disability. I don't know what AD&D is, but that's another $52.15 that's is required to be paid by the city.
So you've got life insurance, disability, and what was the other one?
AD&D, I'm not sure.
It's
Oh,
accidental
that's like, yeah, all right, that's it. So you could actually take the $591.75 and add $52.15, which would get you to $343.90 every 2 weeks.
So this, the insurance, that's a requirement that the city pick that up?
Mm-hmm. Well, Social Security, Medicare, workers' comp is the half and half is a standard the cities has had.
That's the standard.
I don't know where it came from or how it got there, but yeah.
That's the state and federal standard.
Yeah, okay, then that's what it is then.
But the life insurance and the disability insurance and the accidental death and dismemberment.
Those are picked up by the city for all employees.
Okay.
Now, if there's any good.
Not to get too picky with it, but this is kind of changing the agreement.
Right.
My understanding is that an independent contractor would pay their own insurance. And that was kind of the direction we were going.
Right.
So it would be my belief that this would have been included in the amount that we initially started with, the amount for the insurance. It's only $52, but.
Well,
still $52.
I don't.
Is that every 2 weeks? So so it's $100.
Yeah. And these, now the one thing that isn't in here is PERS. Normally you would pay, which is a big, fairly large percentage. You don't have to pay PERS for me at this point, which is fine. Yeah, when I looked at it as a lump sum, and that I would pay my own federal taxes, my own state taxes. The other, insurance, life insurance, medical, I don't need, quite frankly, for numerous reasons, but, so I wouldn't have even paid that.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say, and, maybe this would be better to be, discussed in an executive session, because this is a kind of a contract renegotiation.
Right.
But the way we got to the original number in the contract was we lumped all of those things that we paid separately for the previous administrator, we lumped them all together.
Right.
Into this amount, and that was kind of the amount that we had to pay all of these things.
Right.
And I understand has nothing to do with you as to why it's changing, it's just changing. And like I said, I don't want to get too picky over $100 a month, but still, it's not my money, and it's the public's money. And is there any interest in maybe discussing this more in depth in an executive session?
I think that's a good idea, and I also think it might be an idea that we call Andy, even though, but I don't quite understand. In the beginning, that wasn't an issue. They wrote up the contract. I don't understand why it's changed.
It had to do with his interpretation. His interpretation is that he's not bringing his own equipment. As an independent contractor, like the one we hired, we don't tell him what to do. He's not under our direct authority, but he is. We tell him what to do, and he does it. I mean, and he uses our equipment, he uses our office, and all that.
Well, I think George's point was, though, that, and I asked this very specifically, I said, has the city attorney looked at this? And so the city attorney looked at the contract and knew what I was going to be doing here.
Right.
So for the city attorney to turn around and go, wait a minute,
I agree.
you're not a contractor, you're an employee, but he knew I was going to sit in that office using that computer, so.
Go ahead, Lance.
This is kind of maybe a question for Kevin, or if anyone knows that, because you talked about the assumption was that life insurance, disability, accidental death, and dismemberment insurance would not be, we thought of it as being included in the lump sum. Would an independent contractor, would we also make Social Security, Medicare, workman's comp, and unemployment payments?
Sure.
The entire Social Security, unemployment, workers' comp, all of those things would be, an independent contractor is responsible for the employee's portion of that as well as the employer's portion. So they
Okay.
basically get taxed twice, or twice as much as an employee of another business.
So the answer would, it would not be if it was
It
in
would be included if you were an independent contractor, all of that would be part of the
the lump sum,
lump sum.
not additional costs.
Exactly.
Eva, you had a question?
What about health insurance? Health insurance, the city has just been doing that for like 3 months, right?
Yeah, but see, again, what Kevin just said is correct. With an independent contractor, you don't have to do that. And the thing that seems kind of odd to me is because we have a contract with David Griffin, who does our water testing and stuff, and he's an independent contractor, and he has to have his own bonding, his own insurance. He has to have all that. And we tell him what to do, even though he comes up and tells our guys what to do as well. I mean, I don't quite see the rationality there. The whole point of being an independent contractor isn't the fact that what you do, it's the fact that you are your own boss, and even though we can suggest and tell him what to do, he's still his boss. He's still a contractor. He's independent of us. And they do that all the time. I mean, in construction, we have all kinds of independent contractors. It's commonplace. So I don't quite understand why Andy's changed, especially with the fact that we had his person write up the contract for us prior to us ever giving it to Richard to sign. And then we revised it, and they looked at it again, and then all of a sudden the determination changed after he signed it. And I'm kind of like, but why? It doesn't, I don't, you know, what's, the definition is just the break. It's the fact that Richard is going to take care of himself, basically, when it comes to taxes and Social Security and all that stuff. That's what makes him an independent contractor. And that's a choice that he made. It's not a choice that Andy makes, that's a choice that he made. So that's the thing I don't understand, because
Well, one of the things to point out that regarding what Eva said was, 3 months out, I think it's 3 months out, there are other benefits that kick in, like medical and dental, and that would add more to it.
that's true. But as an independent contractor,
I wouldn't have to worry about it.
you're not privy to that.
Right.
So, anyway, if you want to, we can take consensus if you think we need to talk about this in executive session. I'm more than happy to do that.
Well, I personally think we should, and I think we should have the attorney there. I think we should call the attorney and be part of it.
Yeah, Kevin?
Well, I would like to get some of the council people, which direction we're gonna take. I mean, the advice of the attorney is that Mr. Carson is an employee of the city, and we certainly don't have to take that advice. We can go ahead and employ him as an independent contractor at, I'm not sure whether that's the route I want to take, but I think we need to discuss that, because if we're going to go into an executive session, I think we should know or have some idea of what direction we're going, whether it's to modify this to meet having him as a city employee, or to continue down the path that we started, and that is to treat him as an independent. And if we continue with the independent thing, then we wouldn't need to change things, and we wouldn't, see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Because as an independent, this would be enforced, and
Right.
that would be it.
But you might want to ask the attorney in an executive session, what liability does the city incur if somebody decides you're wrong?
I agree.
I would just suggest that
Absolutely.
you may want his feedback on that.
That was
before you
the
make a
only
decision.
thing that, why did it change, and if so, what are we? So we'll go to executive session after we finish everything else.
Can I just add, I don't know if, we'll have to take a break and make a phone call if
Let
Andy
him
wasn't
get ready.
prepared
Yeah.
to be
Yeah,
available, I don't know. And it was Ron
Guerrero.
that does the employment law, so I don't know if,
Do you have
just
to-
saying, I don't know if we're gonna be able to
Do you have to go,
Well, we
do
can always,
you have to give notice on executive session?
Well,
No,
you
you do
can,
not,
you
no.
can
I think
call
they
it
give
at this
I think they give
meeting.
him notice and let him know that we might want him by phone,
Yeah.
possibly.
And,
But he was saying, do we have to
Public
publicly notice an executive session? But I think if it comes
we
up
might
during a
not be able
meeting,
to
we
get
can
a
do
hold of
it.
him tonight.
yeah, you can say during the meeting that it's actually preferred that you probably don't do it that way, but if you announce it under the right thing, you can.
We can always make it part of our next meeting. It's not gonna affect him getting paid at this point. So, you're gonna get paid regardless.
Oh, thank you.
Well, just a question on that, and I guess Mary Ann's not here, but then, when the paycheck comes out, are we withholding and contributing all those things that we're just talking about, the Social Security?
Yes, and it's already happened because I've already received a check where things were withheld.
We're withheld. So we're
Yes.
following that advice until another decision is
Right.
made. And then my question is, reading through the contract, I don't see where that stuff is mentioned. And so, are we following the contract by doing those withholdings?
And, yeah. The fact that that stuff's already been withheld is not really kosher.
Clearly,
Because it establishes a certain relationship. And it's not, and this isn't the relationship that it establishes right here.
right, way it was handled was not within the scope of the contract.
I mean, I think we've got an issue here because we need to follow the contract that we've entered into. But it also makes sense to follow our legal advice. And there's a discrepancy. Sooner than later, that discrepancy needs to be cleared up. I mean, either way we go, we could be open for some liability.
Well, I would be more, maybe I'm not the appropriate person to do it, but I'd be more than glad to talk to Andy about revising the contract so that everything's consistent.
You want to take a 5-minute break and we can call and see if you can?
Yeah, I think the council has to decide which
Sure.
direction they want to go in revising
Sure.
it. That's just my
Yeah.
opinion. And that's kind of what you were saying too, Kevin.
Yeah, actually, you're better off to
Do you want to call him now?
to pay someone as an independent, because you can always go back and make up the tax by the, at the end of the quarter.
Exactly.
It's not a big deal.
Right.
Exactly.
To start out this way complicates things a bit.
We have a written document
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree.
We have a written
versus,
document. We should
versus a
stick to the
telephone
written-
opinion.
I agree.
Exactly.
Right.
But I don't see why we can't make a phone call during a 5-minute break at this point and see if we can't resolve it tonight, as opposed to waiting 2 weeks.
So let's just take a 5-minute break right now and see if we
Okay.
can.
Let's, I move that we take a 5-minute break. Kevin? Or
You don't
think
have
we
to,
need
you don't have to
do
make a
anything
motion, you can just say, we're taking a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
I was just wondering whether, if we took care of the rest of the agenda items, then we could take the break, get the attorney
Well,
on the
'cause
phone
we
if we
need to
can.
know if the-
And then we could do the executive session if that was necessary as well.
Because if we call him now, then he can be ready by the end of the meeting
That's just an idea.
too.
I'm fine, either way.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, take a break.
Yeah, let's take 5 minutes.
hey Jess,
See if we can even get a hold of him. He might not even be available.
do you have anything to say tonight or?
approve the city administrator's job description. And I think there's a couple of different,
There's three, actually, I think.
I think there's one,
There should be two.
Is there? 'Cause I thought-
but wasn't there one that you guys preferred?
Well, yeah, but there's,
This one isn't one here? This isn't this?
the working document is the one that we're proposing. The one behind that is the one that is the only one that we had on file, which is probably 1968.
And then this one, is that part of the second one? This looks like it's the one that has section 1, section 2.
The first one in your packet says working document is 1 of 3 pages.
Right.
And that's the one that says section
That's the one we're
21.
talking about.
Yeah,
Right.
Section 21 in the first paragraph.
And then the second one in the packet is the only one that we have on file, which is not it. And it doesn't fit.
Okay, and what is it, and the one that has the sections on it, is that part of the second one?
Are you talking about Exhibit A? No.
Exhibit A is ordinance 150. I don't know why it's in there.
Well,
So this is the second one.
the
and
third
this one
page of
here
the
has
second
section 1, section
description
2, section 3, this one here.
is the sections of ordinance
Okay,
150.
that's a part of the old
Okay.
one that's.
Okay, that's part of the other
Doesn't
one,
fit.
all right,
Huh?
sorry,
I'm with it.
got
I
it.
think- Okay.
So that's part of number 2.
Yeah, the one thing that Mary and Bob wanted me to mention was that no matter what direction you go with this, is that you need to name a budget officer, and it is not in the current job description. So, and it is in the new job description, the city administrator is the de facto budget officer, but as part of the process, whoever it is, you need to name the budget officer. This would do that, if you want the city administrator to be the budget officer. But right now, there's nothing in,
Yeah, no, we're doing number
there's nothing in
7.
ordinance that says who it is.
Number 7. Oh, geez.
So is this one the old one?
I think the new one's this one
This
here,
one's
which
the
starts
new
with section 21 in the first
This
paragraph.
one's the old one. This one's the old one,
Okay.
and then this one's the new one.
So what does it say, budget officer in this one?
I'll have to look.
Number 7.
Number 7? Yes, okay, good. That's,
You ready for questions yet?
Wait, who are you asking?
I was asking George, but he's deep in thought.
No, I was just reading real quick. Give me just a minute.
Okay.
Okay, is there questions? Tiffany?
It seems to me like 9 and 11 kind of say the same thing, so I'm wondering if we need, I mean, I know that, 11 speaks directly just to citizen complaints and resolving the issues, but it also says up in 10, kind of the same thing, but expands on it to include everybody else, so, I mean,
Well, I think,
You're on the Article 21?
You're talking about 9 and 11?
yeah, 9 and 11, yeah.
in terms of 9, it talks about me as the city's representative to entities and citizens, whereas 11 is,
Okay.
I think is different in that if a citizen calls, I answer the phone and work through
Okay.
the issue.
And then, number 19, 25% of the time in out-of-city meetings, that's 10 hours. I mean, that's more than a work day. That's a lot.
Yeah,
I changed that specific, this would be my preference. Spends no less than 80% of the time working in the city and no more than 20% of the time out of the city for meetings and training. That would be 4 days a week minimum in the city.
Yeah. Okay, I like that.
Lance had a comment.
You have a question? Go ahead.
My question, I circled that as well. How necessary is that, to have a 19 at all? Maybe Kathy, were you working on that?
This is something that the mayor actually added, I don't know if he remembers that, but,
Oh,
and it is worded a little differently than what he said, but
okay.
I think Rich reworded.
What was it before?
I think the mayor had X amount of hours.
Oh, it was
I can't
I was
remember
hours.
I probably still have the written one somewhere.
Okay.
I probably had 32 and 8.
I mean,
But I didn't think being out of town more than one day a week, 8 hours a week would be adequate. You know, because he needs to be here to do city business.
right, my thought would be that, those kind of decisions are up to the city administrator, him or herself, but if we're noticing that we can't access the city administrator or that things aren't getting done, then we step up and say, wait, where have you been? And then, add that stipulation in, but it's sort of boxed in. I mean, 1 week might be different than another week, and I would leave that up to the professional to make the decision. If a problem arises, then that would be when council might step in and say, hold on, you're averaging 2 days a week in town, we can't get anything done without you, we need you here. But what if there were to be a week where, there was a 3-day training in some other city? Can't go, that's more than 50% even.
Well,
I don't think that this says that, though. It doesn't say on a weekly
But when we
basis.
start talking about hours and stuff.
It says, if it just says a percentage, that means for the entire year, that we expect that out of an entire year, 80% of your time would be spent directly administering your responsibilities. And it's certainly something that to take the opposite argument is that if there was a problem where the administrator couldn't accomplish responsibilities outside of the city in this amount of time, he could certainly come to the council and say, hey, I need another 5% because there's these issues, and I'm certain that the council would say, absolutely, that's not a problem. But I think this alleviates a lot of confusion as to what's expected. My expectation is, especially an administrating position, would be direct administration is the most important. Being here, directly administering the people that you're responsible for is the paramount thing. Training and meetings out of the city are important, but they're nowhere near as important in my estimation as directly supervising the people that you're responsible for. Now that's just my opinion, but.
And I'm not disagreeing with that at all. I'm just saying, and I see the point on the flip side, but I'm saying, it just seems strange to say it, because you're hiring highly trained professional person, and when you do that, my assumption is that they understand when you're in a position of administration, you have to be in the place that you're administrating, and it's up to you to make a professional judgment. But either way, that was just my question on it, is it necessary? And but I see that point, yeah. If there's a bigger need to be outside of the city for some reason, they can ask permission, or you could just let them have permission by not having to be in there. And then if any problems come up, well, wait a minute. So either way, it's there, but I think we should clarify, if we are leaving it in, we should clarify that it's for the duration of a contract rather than on a weekly or monthly basis.
I'm not having trouble with that.
When I put it in, Lance, I put it in because I've just seen there's times when things happen, and it's better to have guidelines than there is not to have anything at all. And so I put those in there for guidelines to help ensure that fact that there will always be somebody here running the city. And I didn't want it to be a situation to where they could be gone for a long period of time doing meetings and doing things and things not getting done at the city. And so I put it in there for a guideline, and you know, I don't have a problem changing it. It's like they changed it from hours to percentage, which is fine.
And the reason I thought it should be changed from hours to percentage was, if you read it originally like 8 hours and say 32 hours, you would think that that was every week. Whereas, because it's a 40-hour week, whereas if you said 80% and 20% or a percentage, that would, you know, then
There'd be more.
that's more general in terms of overtime or on average.
And I can see that.
Yeah.
But initially when I wrote that down,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
Right.
You know, I was just trying to limit it to a certain amount of time so that there was a guideline there. And that was my only thing. So, I have a deal on 16, the responsibility to review and revision and compliance with the city personnel manual and safety manuals. I think it needs to also be said, added as per the council, as approved by council as well.
With the consensus of council?
Yeah, consensus of council, any
Take out the
revisions.
word revision.
The employee manual is adopted by resolution, so, I mean, take out the word revision. To review.
Oh, that'd be easier, wouldn't it? Just take out revision. There you go. Okay.
You could put recommending revision to the council or whatever, but I think
That
it's
falls
pretty,
under
it's pretty
review.
clear, yeah.
Lance, any questions if you're done?
Go ahead, Lance.
I also had a question about number 12, which talks about actively promoting and facilitating a positive relationship with local business community. No question there. But Chamber of Commerce, we're part of a Chamber of Commerce consortium, as I understand it. West Columbia River Gorge Chamber.
That's-
includes force.
No, that's not.
It's not a chamber consortium, it's a consortium of the cities of Fairview, Troutdale, Fairview, and Wood Village. When they work it through the chamber actually hires the person who does the work.
The chamber?
The chamber, and that, I'm not sure what chamber that is.
I think it's the Fairview.
Fairview City.
I think so.
Okay.
Was- yeah.
So in any case,
So there is no Chamber of Commerce, so it shouldn't be in there.
No.
right.
So delete.
Unless you
chamber.
wanted to add the
No, I think just,
West Columbia River
There.
Gorge Consortium, but that's
No. that's-
subject
No,
to,
that's- yeah.
actually,
I agree
the
with
city-
several other cities, so.
I would just leave it at the local business community, because the city of Fairview just pulled out of the West Columbia Gorge Consortium.
Or, yeah,
The city did, not the chamber.
yeah.
But maybe within number 9, we've got working with those other cities.
Yeah.
Right, other government entities.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm wondering, on 13, it says interprets. Is that the city administrator's job is to interpret data, or is it his job to present the data and for us as a council to interpret?
I actually think that's city business. I mean, he's interpreting city business is the way short-term, long-term range plans, gathers, interprets, and prepares data, studies, and reports for recommendations. So
Okay.
he's gonna give us recommendations from that.
And then also on page 3, in the ability to, the very second to the last sentence where it says, as well as demonstrates strong work ethics, I'm wondering if we could add the wordage as laid out in the ICMA Code of Ethics, which is, the city manager's administration code of ethics is a pretty sound document. I don't know.
Use it in lieu of what's here.
Well, just as laid out in the ICMA Code of Ethics, and I can get everybody a copy of it if they want to see it, but, I mean, it has these
For a whole bunch.
12 tenets
Yeah.
that,
I'm actually a member of ICMA and already bound by those.
yeah. But,
Those requirements,
but
yeah.
would it be a bad idea to have
No.
it stated here in the,
I'd have to do it either way.
yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thought on that would be perhaps under experience and training, or another section, require membership in ICMA.
Yeah.
Which would take care of that.
That would be fine.
Is that?
Where would that go?
Under experience
Well,
and
it could be in experience and training.
Add
Is that a
membership.
training organization or is it just a professional
It's a
organization?
professional organization.
So, then I would say you'd have another section that would say
You just say membership.
memberships,
Yeah.
required to be a member of the ICMA.
ICMA. It's actually the International City County Management Association, but it's called ICMA for short.
I had a comment on the general statement of duties, and it refers to ordinance 150.
Okay, where, say that again, please?
Under general statement of duties, the very first paragraph in the job description on the working document. And it kind of paraphrases it a bit, but it kind of modifies it a bit as well. General statement of duties, under general direction of the mayor and city council implements policy as established by them, administers plans, directs the overall operation and functions of the city as outlined in the City of Cascade Locks Charter, Section 21, and pursuant to any limitation in existing and subsequent ordinances of the City of Cascade Locks.
Yeah.
Ordinance 150, an ordinance establishing the office of city administrator for the City of Cascade Locks, Oregon, authorizing appointments of the city administrator and prescribing general duties of the administrator. The third paragraph, whereas the city council desires to provide said administrator with sufficient powers to enable him to handle the administrative affairs of the city in the most efficient and expeditious manner possible, in accordance with the existing charter and pursuant to any limitations in existing and subsequent ordinances of the City of Cascade Locks. And this is the part that's modified, is subject, however, to the complete control of the mayor and the city council, who shall continue to exercise and have the primary responsibility for the affairs of the city government and city public works and utilities as set out in the charter of 1956 for the city of Cascade Locks, Oregon. These two things, I think, conflict in that or in my opinion, they don't clarify exactly the same things. This says, under the general direction of the mayor and city council, and this says, subject, however, to the complete control of the mayor and city council. And I don't have a problem changing ordinance 150 if that's where this process is leading to, if we want to modify that. But I don't think that these two necessarily agree with each other in that regard.
I think the city attorney kind of spoke to that during the goal-setting session, that there was some need for codification of the ordinances because there are conflicts between charter, ordinance, and ordinances.
And I agree that that's something that I've actually been saying for a year or two, that it's something that needs to be addressed. But I believe that the first step is to address the ordinance before we create another document that disagrees with the original ordinance.
I thought that the personnel handbook was the one that was in disagreement.
And that was in regard to hiring and firing, but there's never been any statement from the attorney that ordinance 150 is not still in effect.
Lance?
Well, the way I was reading that last clause, after the comma, section 21, pursuant to any limitation in existing and subsequent ordinances. So if this says under the general direction, policy establishment them, plans and directs, but then there's a subsequent or existing ordinance, 150, that would take precedence over the job description.
And
I still see the difference that you're saying, but I wonder if that last clause there doesn't address that difference by saying it's general direction unless there's city chart, unless the existing or subsequent ordinances were to change it.
And that's kind of my point is, I think these two things kind of give a different impression. And wouldn't it be just as easy to, under the general statement of duties, quote the ordinance, as opposed to saying, well, you need to refer back, you need to check and see if there's any ordinances that disagree with this. Let's just go directly to the ordinance and paste this part into the general statement of duties and put it right there, or change 150 if that's the direction we want to go. I think that that's the clearest, most concise
It
way of
leads you
doing
directly
things,
to where you need to go.
as opposed to saying,
Yeah.
and this actually does say the same thing too. Is I think that verbiage is directly from here, unless there's an existing or subsequent in accordance with the existing charter and pursuant to any limitation in existing or subsequent ordinances. That is a direct quote of this paragraph. I'm just wondering why we're not including the rest of that paragraph. I guess is really to boil it down. Why not just include the whole thing? Or, like I said, if we're intending to modify that, then let's modify it and include the modified section in the job description. Because it doesn't benefit anybody for there to be confusion over authorities or responsibilities or anything. It's best if it's laid out clearly and concisely for us and for the city administrator too, to where there's not a conflict of, well, that's my authority, or that's your responsibility, or that's my responsibility.
So what is your proposal? Just put, and pursuant to ordinance 150, and scratch out the rest of that whole line?
My suggestion would be that this third paragraph would be the general statement of duties.
For 150.
Okay, the third paragraph in 150, so is that section 1, or is that the
Section
last
3.
whereas, or?
It's the last whereas, exactly. Because the earlier whereases are basically a justification for the established in the office, and the third is a description of the office itself.
Yeah, I like that. The third whereas, just be the general statement of duty.
You would take out the word whereas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would we state that it was from ordinance 150 then? Would,
I don't think you wanna put that, because the
Okay.
ordinance could change, and then you're gonna have to go back and
I can
change
change the description, okay.
But as long as this is what you wanna say, it doesn't matter where it
Comes from,
came from, I mean,
okay.
in the end.
Eva's had her hand up.
Go ahead, Eva.
Actually, that just kind of cleared it up, because I was gonna say, if we're gonna reference 150, then it makes it, if you change 150, then you also have to go back to another document and change it, so it'd be better to either just say generally 150 and not put any wordage in there, or just put wordage in there, because the wordage can be anything we want it to be.
Okay, Councilmember Benson, can I just have clarification on what right now is in general statement of duties on the job description? Take that completely out and insert that last whereas? Or do you want that,
Without the word whereas.
I know without the word whereas.
Well,
Do you want that, what's in here now, under general direction of the mayor and city council, you want that out? That whole paragraph out, and insert what was in 150?
I would say yes, because there's only a few, maybe two sentences that aren't already in, and that one of them is City Charter Section 21, and then the first sentence under general direction. So I would say yes, delete this in its entirety and insert this in its entirety.
Okay.
With, I don't know what the rest of the council would feel about the last sentence in that is as set out in the Charter of 1956. Is that important to be in there or not?
Probably not really.
Because it's probably not relevant because we have a new charter.
Yeah, you have a good charter.
Right.
So delete
Go
from the
ahead.
comma, the last
Sorry.
comma to the period from as set out in the Charter of 1956 for the city of Cascade Locks, Oregon.
Okay, why don't you have a comment?
Okay, yeah, well, I understand the idea. The reason why I don't support making that change is that we're talking about an ordinance from 1968 that references a charter from 1956, and there have been changes on a variety of different levels since then. I believe that there's, there is that distinction Kevin's raised between complete control of the mayor and council and general direction of the mayor and council between the two paragraphs. To me, the general direction of mayor and city council is more descriptive of what the practice has been, at least since the Charter of 1995 was passed. So, for that reason, I mean, I don't mind, maybe deleting the word general, but I like the general statement of duties kind of the way it was written, as opposed to going back to 1956, going back to 1958, and the way it was done when the Office of City Administrator was first created. The council wasn't sure what that role was going to be. Since then, we've had decades of city administrators, and I'm not sure that Ordinance 150 does really describe what the city administrator does in actual practice, and I think that ought to be what we're looking at addressing rather than the job description.
Tom?
Well, I believe it does. I believe it covers it very well, and I believe this is what the citizens of the town, I think they were right in what they were doing.
In
And
1968.
from my side of it, they were right. And why change something that works? They brought an administrator because they felt they needed somebody to help manage it. Prior to that, they did it themselves. But they still wanted to make sure they were in control of it. And I think this section in here covers everything that's in the general statement of duties and and distinguishing features. And I think it's very important for it to say in the complete control of mayor and city council. Because that's what the charter says, and that's what the ordinance says. And I think it's very important to follow that. That's what's happening.
That's not
to
what the
us.
charter says.
I believe we've watered it down.
But that's
The
not
charter
what
does say that.
the charter's right here.
Well, the charter says that everything is, the charter says right in there that everything follows the lead of the council and the council. It does not give it to the administrator. And that's what this does. This makes it very clear who has the final call. Is the mayor and the council. And so does the charter.
But it's not in the charter.
Yeah,
It's right
it is.
here, show me.
In the charter. So you guys go ahead and carry out your thing here, and I'll find you.
I did have a comment on the 1968, 1956. The very last sentence on ordinance 150, section 2, subsection A. Ordinance 150 was considered and modified by the city council on February 10th, 1997. So this isn't some document that was created in 1968 and then forgotten about and never considered again. This was actually considered and amended by the city council and the mayor on February 10th of 1997.
I got it.
So that tells me that
I got it.
they were fully aware in 1997 of what duties and responsibilities had been given to the city administrator, considered them, modified them, and continued with ordinance 150 in 1997 after the most recent charter was adopted.
Can I say something in between here?
The mayor.
Okay, I'm used to asking everybody else, but the one thing that I want to say is that we are adding this to the job description of the city administrator, okay? So, and I read the words that's here, and to me, they're very clear, they're very precise. I don't see a problem with it whatsoever. So, keep in mind that we're adding this to the job description of the city administrator, okay? We're not changing the ordinance right now. We're just talking about adding it to the job description of the city administrator, which is just for clarity. And I think the words seem quite adequate to me. That's all I wanted to say.
Go ahead.
You mean Lance?
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, and I wanted to make sure I understand as well that we're talking about changing the job description, and my point is I like what's in there already, because it refers to the charter of 1995, rather than pulling out an ordinance from 1968 that refers to the charter of 1956, and just for the record also to address Kevin's point about the change that was made in 1997, at that point, the only thing that was considered and made and changed by the council was deleting section 2, subsection A, which was the city administrator should prepare the annual budget for consideration by the city council and budget committee. They deleted that out of ordinance 150,
Okay.
which is another, I think, question that Mr. Carson was raising for us to decide tonight. In 1997, that power was taken away from the city administrator. And the other point I would make is that if you look at ordinance 150 in its entirety, it does say that section 4, city administrator is appointed by the mayor, whereas the charter of 1995 says city administrator is appointed by the mayor and council. So that's a change that was made in 1995. As it was reviewed in 1997, that difference apparently didn't show up because it wasn't changed. But the one thing that was changed was to delete the power to prepare the annual budget for consideration.
Okay. Eva, did you have a question?
Just one quick little thing, because I think we're kind of getting more kind of dynamic, and in some ways, maybe we need to. we referenced one fifty, because it looks like, I mean, if we wanted to change anything, we could go back later and change one fifty, right?
But we're not talking about 150, we're talking about just
No, correct, but
changing the job
to make the
description.
ease of this, because we're kind of getting into more of a conversation, wouldn't it be easier just for this description to leave the wording the way it is? And if we feel it's important, if you're trying to refer it to wherever you want it to refer to. And then if there's some question as if we need to change something or review, whatever, that we can do that later rather than kind of cannon that out tonight. Does that make sense?
I'm gonna call for a consensus vote on,
I got one more
oh, you got another
thing I want.
thing?
On the charter here, in chapter 2, powers. Where powers vested, or section 6, where powers vested, except as the charter provides, otherwise, all powers of the city shall be vested in the council. All powers. And then in section 21, city administrator, there shall be a city administrator who will be appointed and serve at the will of the city council. The city administrator shall be responsible to the city council for the proper administration of all affairs of the city of Cascade Locks and for carrying out the policies established by the city council. So, to me, it's the same thing. The council in twice here in stating powers and stating the job description of the city administrator is hanging on to the power. And that is exactly what ordinance 150 does.
Well, if the charter says it, then
That's what it says.
let's keep the reference to the charter. What the charter doesn't say is complete control and a lot of the language that's in ordinance 150. So that was my point. If you want to use what the charter says, I'm all for it, but it's actually already in the general statement of duties.
I believe the charter says it, and so does 150.
Okay, so what's on the floor is calling for a consensus vote as to what Kevin proposed to have the job description changed to the city council desires, the third whereas, and ordinance 150 be added to the general statements. Eva?
Can you start with that? I just want to read it one more time.
Okay.
So start over here.
Hmm?
So it's just to start at this end. So
Want to
I'm-
start over here?
Yeah, so I'm for that change.
Lance?
Could you repeat what you're saying, what Kevin proposed?
Yeah, he
I
proposed
haven't
it.
changed my mind, no.
No.
No? Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I'm with what Kevin proposed.
Kevin?
Yes.
I don't think it's necessary. I'm listening to it.
Okay.
Not that I don't-
And I say yes. So, 4-2. Okay. So, is there any other things on the job description that we need that needs further discussion? Yes, Eva?
Just real quick, go back to 19. We were talking about if they need to, if we want to, if the city administrator feels that he needs to spend more time, do you think it's necessary to come back to the council, or could that person just go to the mayor and get approval? Necessary for the mayor.
Which one are you looking at?
Number 19?
The 80-20%?
Yeah, just quickly, I just thought about it.
In truthfulness, I really doubt that it's ever gonna be an issue. If you figure 20% of 2,000 hours, that's,
It's 52 days a year. Obviously.
but they could come back to actually either the mayor or the council, I would think at that time it wouldn't be an issue.
It might not be an issue with us, but what if it didn't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You
well,
never know when it's going to be an issue, so I just thought, well, that would be,
well,
to me, it would be easy.
then it should be back to the council because that has the ultimate, they have the ultimate power. So we should say that, make a statement in there that if additional time is needed, that it has to be approved by the council. Everybody agree with that? Lance?
I wanted to go on to a different issue, so if you want to finish that.
Oh, okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
I would say it's repetitive, I think.
It's not necessary, it was just for discussion.
Oh, I
So
see.
it's not, it's just, you know, I didn't know what people thought, you know, and my kind of thought was just like, it doesn't seem like it would be a very big deal, so it might be easier just to go to the mayor and say, hey. But,
Okay.
you know, if it's necessary, then I'm okay with that too.
All right.
Just mention that.
Anybody else have any discussion on that?
We're saying 80-20,
Yeah.
80 in the city, 20% out.
Yeah.
In the records of the minutes, it's gonna indicate that we've already talked about what we mean by that. And that if there changes need to be made, or different circumstances come up, the council can approve it. So that's, I mean, it's not as easy to reference, but it's in the minutes, so there's a legislative history.
Yeah, I don't think there's.
They certainly could change
It's
it
not
at
an issue.
their will anyway,
Sure.
irregardless. So,
Okay. Did you have another question on something else, Lance?
Yeah, if you, we talk about changing the general statement of duties. If you skip down to supervision received, it says work is performed under the general supervision of the mayor and council. It appears we were not okay with under the general direction of the mayor and city council above. My question is, are we then okay with work performed under the general supervision of the mayor and council, or do we need to change that to reflect ordinance 150's language as well? So I guess it would potentially say something like work is performed under the complete control or complete control and supervision of, or something like that.
I think general supervision's pretty much the same, Lance. I mean, if you're supervising, you're supervising.
But we changed general direction in the previous one, so I just want to make sure that if we're changing that one, are we creating more of an ambiguity within this document now, or do we want to change that to reflect
Would
ordinance
you
150?
take the word general?
I would say there's, direction and supervision are two entirely different words.
Right, yeah, but it's, the general is the same, so I wondered if that's the issue, or if it's, we have to have complete control in one or both.
If you're looking to say that, I mean, I guess if you're looking to say that he works under the specific supervision of the council, that would imply that we're to be there directly supervising him constantly, as opposed to direction is something different than supervision. If I direct someone to do something that works for me, I give them specific direction. That doesn't mean I'm specifically going to supervise them in carrying out my direction. They're two totally different things. And if you have a proposal, I'd be glad to hear it if you.
Well, I was just going back to
wording
ordinance
you would propose.
150 where
Do
it's
you have wording
second.
you would propose to put in there? In
I did just
150
say
where-
something.
Where it says direct supervision?
Well, that would be another proposal.
No, I mean, you're, if we're gonna talk, if you have a specific proposal.
I did just say something.
Okay, could you repeat it then?
I said work performed under the complete control and supervision, because I'm just going back to ordinance 150.
Control and
Where's that?
supervision.
That's in the third whereas that we just copied.
It doesn't say supervision.
No, it doesn't.
150 doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So that's why I was asking the question, because I just see the similarity between general direction, and then I look down one more paragraph and I say general supervision. If you don't think if you don't think it's necessary to change it, fine, that's all, I'm just asking the question. And then, I suggested use the language in ordinance 150.
I don't see anything about control under supervision received. Is there?
Let me.
If you look at the first
let me
paragraph
ask
on
a
that
question.
page.
Hang on. Let me ask one question. Richard, in your interpretation, is there any, do you have any problem with the supervision received, where it says work performed under the general supervision of the mayor and the city council? Do you have any problem with that?
No.
Okay. I don't think it's an issue myself. Right. More discussion, or do I need to call consensus?
Do we want to vote on it tonight, or do we want to vote on the final
I-
product?
just vote on the final project. Is there any more statements on any other issues? Seeing none, let's take a consensus vote to vote on the job description of the city administrator with,
Kathy has something to say.
yes,
What is the consensus vote gonna be on?
on the items that we asked to change, that we've been telling you to change.
Because you've been taking notes on.
No, I know, okay, I
Or do we,
guess.
or do we need to do it a different way?
No, I guess then I just want clarification on the topic that just went around. That's what I thought you were, that's where I thought you were going.
Okay,
Is that,
yeah, we probably should
is
take a
the language
Yeah.
gonna stay as it is under supervision received?
Oh, we'll take a consensus vote. Eva,
No, I'm good with that. With the way it is.
Kevin,
I'm okay with the way that it is now.
Tom,
Good with it.
Lance?
I'm fine with it.
I'm fine. We already got
I'm fine with it too.
Okay,
So,
sorry.
that's fine. So now we'll take a consensus vote to make all the changes that we've discussed tonight on the job descriptions? Or do you need to go through and rewrite them and then give them to us to do?
I think Councilmember Pruitt was suggesting that we come back with a clean copy, everybody can see and make sure that all the changes were made and
Okay,
take
So-
the vote.
then there's no consensus. Yes, Kevin?
Mr. Mayor, could I also suggest that we reconsider ordinance 150 at the same time, so that there's no further confusion about a 1968 document, so that it can be a 2011 document, and that way it'll be clear that this is what we consider the ordinance that refers to the authorities and responsibilities of the city administrator.
Yeah, we can go to that now that we're done with the job description.
I was suggesting that it be put on the agenda for when we consider
For
the
the
job
next-
description in the future. I think it needs to
Okay.
be put on the agenda for the public to be able to voice their opinions on it. But I think it's something that clearly needs to be taken care of, so we can do away with the confusion and all of that.
I agree with that. And we'll add it to the agenda of our next meeting.
Kathy's got her hand up.
Kathy?
Okay, so on the next agenda, the action item would be,
Consideration
Review.
of modifications to ordinance 150, or reaffirming or whatever.
so.
Review, yeah,
Review and
consideration,
discuss.
review,
Okay.
possible modifications to ordinance 150.
So that's a workshop item?
Be an action item.
What's the action? To review something?
To reaffirm, okay, reaffirm ordinance 150 as the ordinance that addresses the authorities of the city administrator.
Well, can, Rich, maybe you can help me. If
Maybe not.
okay, if it's a workshop item and you discuss it, and there are no changes, you know, everybody talks and, you know, everybody's agreeing that ordinance 150, you know, during the workshop, whatever. If there's no changes to be made, let's say you guys say, okay, put it on the next agenda with these changes, amendments, whatever. If there's no changes, it's 150 is in place. It's,
Well,
it,
and that's, I think, where the confusion arises, because my opinion is that it's in place right now.
well, it is.
Okay.
Until it's repealed, it's in
Exactly.
place.
That's my whole point.
Okay, so I guess I'm trying to figure out if we put it on the agenda as an action item,
Or a workshop.
well, that was a discussion. I just,
Yeah. The
I
workshop,
accepted it would be in minutes, I guess, that,
I'm just looking for a way to if we're gonna change it, let's change it. If we're not gonna change it, let's reestablish that it is in fact ordinance that is in force at this time. Because there seems to be some discussion from the city attorney that parts of it aren't in force, and there's discussion that it was established in 1968, so therefore it's not clear as to.
Well, hold on, if you're talking about what I said, that's not what I said.
The ordinance is still in force.
Okay.
Okay, Lance, did you have a question?
I just wanted to comment on that. Certainly, you can look at the city charter where it says that the city administrator is appointed by the mayor and the council. In ordinance 150, where it says the city administrator is appointed by the mayor, certainly we can all see that that is a difference between ordinance 150 and the charter of 1995.
Okay.
So at least that would be up for discussion in a workshop session. I would also look at where it references the charter of 1956. That could be changed to the charter of 1955. And keep the ordinance exactly the same way it is, but at least change that so that we're referencing our current charter rather than.
This is something that we can discuss it.
Yeah, and that's why, but I would say it's a workshop item. The action item would be voting on a new ordinance. There's a process that you go through and vote on a new ordinance. The discussion about whether to go through that process would be a workshop item. So that's why I raised the question of, wouldn't that be a workshop?
My question is, in my inexperience, I apologize, but, so, in either case, if we change any wording in the ordinance, can that be done in a workshop, or can it only be done
Well,
as an action item?
No, it has to be done as
You got the
Right.
Then we need to make it an action item.
Well,
Because if we're gonna
That's not the
discuss
process.
it, and we're talking about making changes, to make any changes to a current ordinance, if we're gonna make a change to it, then we have to do it as an action item.
Okay, Mayor, how we would do it is in workshop, you guys could decide if there were changes to be made. Then we would work up either an amended ordinance, which with our current system, we don't want to do. Or we would come back the next meeting
With an action item.
with an action item to adopt that ordinance. It would be worked up with whatever changes you guys
Okay.
So you could talk about the
were
workshop,
discussing in the workshop.
put it over one, and then
And
act.
then the next time,
And then,
make it an
and then
action
it's
item.
either voted,
All right.
well, it actually might be two
I see.
meetings, it's voted in or
That
it's
sounds
not
like-
voted in, then 150 is still in place.
It's still in place until we change it. So let's do a workshop, and then we'll do the action items to change it, so. All right?
Lance, are you saying that the mayor, according to the charter, appoints the city administrator? I don't
No, I'm saying that according to ordinance 150, the mayor appoints. I'm saying according to the charter.
I see.
I mean, but this is all
All right.
for a discussion in a workshop at the next meeting.
Fine.
We don't have to get into it now.
Okay.
Good question. That leaves you still without a budget officer. And I don't know off top of my head if it can wait till the next meeting
I don't know that either, no.
to
Mary,
do
I don't
that.
know.
Because we're on the clock now, but we don't have, somebody has to prepare it and bring the budget forward.
Kevin has his hand up.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move to appoint the city administrator as the city's budget officer.
It's been moved by Kevin Vidsa and seconded by Eva to appoint Richard Carson as our budget officer. All those in favor?
Discussion.
Oh, discussion? I was getting right to it, buddy. Discussion, any discussion?
We're specifically naming him, so we'll have to do it again in the future, or are we just gonna do it in the city?
Hopefully when we address 150, we can address it as part of that.
I see, okay.
Because it used to be in 150 until 97.
Okay. Yes,
It's not a discussion, you're comfortable with that? Is that what you're expecting, Mr. Carson?
Well, it isn't so much what I'm expecting, but it's probably the most expeditious way to get the budget going, is to have, as a budget officer, I can get the budget prepared and bring it forward. But under ORS, the city has to designate the budget officer to start the clock, and I'm fine with that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of Richard Carson being our budget officer? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? None? Okay. So, we will move on to mayor and council comments. At this time, I would like to give a brief, somewhat brief, I'll try to make it brief, report. We went to the Warm Springs Indians tribe, it's been about 2 weeks ago now, and talked to them about the possibilities of the casino moving to Cascade Locks. And we had a nice meeting with the tribe. The port officials were there as well. And they informed us that they are going to be moving their casino from Canita to Highway 26, right across from their museum that they have. And they're going to be opening the casino there in the hopes of trying to generate additional income. They told us that they still have plans on having the casino in Cascade Locks. We were informed that there are several issues still out there that are being, it's kind of drawing the whole situation out. One is finances. They're definitely in a financial situation right now. Two is the Department of Interior. They are still waiting for, it's called a two-part agreement to be signed. And kind of the thing that we heard there was that it's being kind of delayed due to another senator who's opposed to a casino down in Southern California. And so it's kind of muddied up the works, and so everything's just kind of gotten really stagnated. Nothing's happening in that point, so they're still hopeful that something will happen there. Once that does happen, it will go to the Oregon governor, and then it will be up to him. So it looks like it's going to take a while. So I guess that's the best way to put it. But they haven't gave up. They still want it to be in Cascade Locks. I'm pretty sure they mentioned that if they can't have it in Cascade Locks, they will revert back and go back to Hood River, but that would take even more time. So that was pretty much the gist of it. So that's all I have to say. Is there any council members that have any comments they'd like to say? Seeing none, we will move to staff notes. Kathy, you have any staff notes?
I don't.
Richard, it's your time to talk.
I'm the budget officer now, so.
I'm not saying.
I'm not gonna say anything else. My plate's full.
Okay, we'll go to televised workshop. The first, actually, before we go there, I'd like to take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Right here.
Okay, we're going to the televised workshop. We're going to discuss item A, discuss renewal of the 2011-2012 agreement for the Hood River County Law Enforcement Services. Anyone has a copy of the contract? Is there any comment from the council?
I have some questions. On this section 3 where it says, this agreement provides for a sheriff deputy to spend at least 24 hours per week performing law enforcement patrols within the city, excluding I-84, not within the city limits of Cascade Locks. Does that mean we get charged for things that they do within this? Is any of 84 within the city limits?
Yes.
So, and we have to pay for that, even though
Well,
that's really not our road?
I think that's why it says excluding I-84. In other words, within the city limits,
What?
everything within the city limits, they are providing services except for
Okay, but
the federal highway,
But it
federal
says
freeway.
not within, excluding I-84, not within the city limits. So to me, that says to me that we pay for what they do within the city limits on I-84.
Right.
Why?
Is part of it in the city limits?
Well,
Sure.
Yes.
yeah,
I mean, because the river,
Well,
the
you could-
river has
if-
between 64 and 62, that's
Right.
within there, and
If There's the city limits right there, and you can see where the freeway goes right through the city. Yeah.
so that's part of our coverage? I mean, should it be? I don't know that that's, is
It's-
that, to
it's-
me, that doesn't,
Well, not much is gonna happen there.
well, I mean, I don't know.
Actually, a lot can happen.
A lot can happen
But not
there.
them patrolling it though. They're not gonna patrol it, because they have to go to Bonneville then.
But if they're including that as part of
And
their
why is it patrol?
city work, doing I-84 patrol, I mean,
They could be given tickets to truckers.
This Hood River,
Yeah.
Hood River City Police Department does patrol on 84 between exit 62 and exit 64. It's not uncommon. Most city police departments do patrol.
Fairview,
Sure.
speed trap.
They go out there and give tickets. I've
But
seen
that's,
them
but
sort
that's
out
their,
these.
but that's their normal job. Why should we, as a city, have that be part of our 24 hours? That's my question.
It depends how you read this. I mean, if you read it, if you leave out the not within for a minute, first it says they provide it to the city excluding I-84. So I would take it that it says they're not charging us for I-84, but then it qualifies it one more step and then says not within the city limits. I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
Yeah.
How is I-84 not
I
within
believe
the
there's
city
part of
limits?
Interstate 84 that is within that.
right.
Yeah, I think they should take out not within the city limits.
The one-
Okay, well, we can certainly send it back to them with that language taken out, so it's clear, because I don't know what it means. Excluding I-84 makes sense, but
Well, they're, yeah, they're excluding I-84, it's not in the city limits, so with them driving down here, they're not patrolling between here and Hood River, charging us for it.
I think that's what the
Yeah.
origin of that was,
Yeah, they're not.
that
Yeah.
their patrol time did not start when they left the city, or when they left the sheriff's office. When they're driving on I-84 to the city, that's not part of their 24 hours.
it just,
That's where that's
it almost reads like it's saying that we're paying for patrols on all of I-84 outside of the city limits, which is not what it could mean.
It could say including I-84, the part of I-84 that's within the city limits.
But I don't think we should pay for that. I don't,
Well, it says
I think
excluding.
it should be for the city only. I don't think that,
Do you see what I'm saying? That's how,
Yeah,
I believe that's how that got in there.
I can understand that, but that's, I mean, that's gonna be open to interpretation, to me.
It would have been easier if they didn't put the parentheses, excluding Interstate 84 not within the city limits of Cascade Locks.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess is what we want in there is that we want all of the 24 hours to be spent patrolling the streets of Cascade Locks, period, not the freeway, excluding 84 entirely.
Yeah.
I don't see why that would be an issue.
I think if you leave the words excluding I-84 and take out not within the city limits of Cascade Locks, you get there.
Sure.
And I think that would make, because basically, you know, they're a county police anyway, so basically they gotta go to the county line
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah,
And if an incident happened down this way, they would be sent down here. So if they're already here, taking care of us, and something happens out there, we shouldn't get charged for the base, we've shortcutted it for, basically, to come out here on,
Additionally,
go out on 84 if there's an incident.
additionally, we don't, like a lot of cities, if they write a ticket to someone on 84 that's within the city of Cascade Locks, that doesn't go to court here, it goes to court in Hood River. And the city doesn't get any revenue from that.
Yeah.
Run that by me again?
If they write a ticket, a speeding ticket on Interstate 84, within the city limits of
Mhm.
Cascade Locks, that ticket doesn't go to the justice court here.
It doesn't.
No, it does not. It goes to Hood River, right?
I don't know.
I think all she deals
I'm-
with, I think.
Yeah, pretty certain. And therefore, we don't share in the revenue generated by us having an officer in Cascade Locks. Hood River County would get that revenue entirely. So basically, we would be paying for an officer who's
Generating revenue.
I mean, that's not his duty, but in his duties, we're hiring someone who in his duties generates revenue, but we're not sharing in that revenue.
Versus write the speeding ticket on Wanapa, it does generate.
Well, unfortunately, we don't share in any of the revenue for any of the tickets they write for some reason.
Yeah.
That
Hood River County.
precedes
I
us.
remember, because there used to be, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We can ask the clarification.
So that's
It
almost a
goes-
moot
but
point.
it goes way back, yeah.
Difference between 84 and
Well,
the
the-
city streets, there is no difference, because we're not getting any.
Yeah,
of it.
but we want.
Why have them on the freeway if we're not,
Yeah.
I mean, we want them in town anyway.
Okay.
So why have them on the freeway? If they wanna be on the freeway, they can do that on their own time.
And to run them on the freeway, you gotta go from Bonneville to Wyeth. They've gotta run those, to hit an exit, they can't, once they get to run this area through here, they gotta go that far to do it all.
Right.
They can patrol through our city limits.
Well, yeah, the point of us paying extra is to have them in town.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Also, did they give a cost of how much it was gonna be for the provided, if they provided extra coverage, how much that was gonna be, how much that was going to cost? Is that, if those costs went up last year?
Well,
And
I
I'd be curious to know
The
how much,
base cost went up this year.
well, I got that, but I wanna know, they were giving us kind of a sort of a discounted rate for, they were going to try to use their reserves first, and then, I mean,
So
is that,
it's at whatever their rate of pay is what they said the last contract.
well, and is that still in place this year? That would be nice to know, and I'd be curious to know how often they did that, and how much more,
I asked Marianne and
they didn't,
there was no extra.
okay?
And that doesn't mean that something's not gonna come up that there isn't, but she said there wasn't.
It's not in
extra.
here.
I got that, that's why I was asking the
Yeah.
question.
There's no extra charges or no?
There wasn't this last year.
But I know that they patrolled on 4th of July. They actually-
How many years have we been paying for 24 extra hours on the council, do you guys know?
It was actually more hours.
Yeah,
It was 40 hours at one time,
How long have we been?
within the last few years.
yeah.
It was 40 hours. I believe it was 40 when I came on council.
I guess I don't quite understand.
It's been 24 since I've
We
been.
live in Hood River County, I don't quite understand why they don't cover Hood River County.
Well, they do, we're paying for extra.
Yeah,
They still come here, they still cover Hood River County.
they'll come for a
We're just
call.
paying for extra coverage.
Yeah.
Just to have them here.
Yeah,
We're paying for an additional 24 hours
Right.
of coverage of patrol
Over something.
each week.
Right.
over a
Well,
call
we
when
asked-
they're not
we
We're
here.
asked
on
the
20th
sheriff
of,
that question last time he was here. If we didn't have this contract, how often would you get down here? He said, I don't know that we could get down here. We'd have to matrix it out. That was his, I mean, we can look it up in the minutes, I'm pretty sure that's a direct quote. Never explained what matrix it out meant, but the threat was, if we don't have this contract, might be a long time between sheriff visits to Cascade Locks. Because they're facing budget cuts at the county level, subject to a lot of different things, but primarily the cut in the timber payments with federal government
Mhm.
have really put a squeeze on their budget. And to get someone down here, they rely on these 24 hours that we pay for.
I was just
That's the way
wondering
he put it
because
to us, so.
We're facing some budget things too that are gonna come up, and I'm just curious how we're gonna pay for extra to do this. I understand the need and the want to have it, but, you know, if these things change and we don't have the money in the budget, something else is gonna have to give. Yeah, Kevin?
Well, section 5,
The old one or the new one?
may be terminated, giving 60 days written notice. There is an out for us there if we do find that we don't have the funds to continue the service.
Well, is that still in there? Is this it? Because I have two, right? So
Yeah,
this
one
the
is
new
this
Yeah,
year's
right.
and one is next year's. They both have.
The one that doesn't have the date, but it's not section 5, right?
The sign,
I'm sorry,
It goes to section 7.
Well, I missed that whole paragraph.
Oh, that's
Okay.
Tiffany?
That's different.
For the very last one on 9C,
They're different.
I'd like the word,
I thought this was just
Oh, both, two of them here.
yeah,
number 7.
On which,
Invoice
old
on
one?
the new one.
The new one.
The
Number
new
7.
one has a handwritten, 2011, 2012.
Yeah, I was saying
Okay,
the
so
termination clause is
Yeah,
7.
there's no saying, yeah.
And just to explain to the public that last year's contract was for $82,000 and this year's proposed contract is for $84,258. I'd like to have some verbiage added to section 9C where the invoice and accounting, I would like it to say, for that last sentence, the city in turn will pay the invoice to the county no later than 15 days after receipt, provided a monthly report has been submitted, because we've had issues with that in the past. Because where we've not received the reports
Yeah, good.
for a few months, or,
So you mean after receipt of the monthly report?
invoicing and accounting, well, I would like to see it down for, that we pay them 15 days after receipt, provided a monthly report has been submitted.
Well,
Well, that's-
I think the first sentence, will provide to the city the above report 15 days after the last day of
Okay.
each month,
Okay.
along with the
All right,
invoice.
all right,
And we've been getting the reports and we have not been paying the invoice until we receive it.
okay,
And that section was inserted
because of that.
at our
Okay.
request
Okay.
last year.
Okay, and then my other thing is that I feel that since we contract out of the city for this, and I know this is gonna be like a really touchy subject, but I feel that the port should be helping us pay for this contract. They have the most, they own the most property. We didn't pay extra for events last year apparently, but I think that since they're a non-tax paying entity, that they should, somehow, we should be having them help us pay for this.
we could still enter into the agreement, and if you wanted to direct me to go meet with the port to talk about sharing in the cost, I'd be glad to do that.
So we should, can we
Is
give
there a rush to enter into the agreement? It's not due up until July, right?
They're probably doing their budget right now as well.
We just said
County, I would bet.
Yeah, you're right.
April 1st is when they had to give it to us. I think it was,
They had to get it to us, yeah.
by April 1st.
Yeah.
And you still have to act on it as part of our budget.
Right.
So, it won't be over until probably, that
June
decision
30th.
by the council won't be made probably until June.
Right. So, can we give a consensus to him to talk to Chuck about it?
I guess, my concern would be that, what's he gonna discuss with Chuck? Is Chuck paying for half of this, or the port paying for half of this, or is the port contracting with the sheriff's department separate from us to provide more coverage, or, I think we should give him some direction as to what it is we're interested in the discussion pertaining to.
Well,
So we can ask him to pay a part of this contract, we can ask, like I said.
I think it would make it cleaner if we, went to them and we maintain the primary contract with the sheriff's department. We don't have to change anything in terms of our relationship, and it would be that the port would contribute some money towards this amount. Like a pay, transfer of payments. They don't have to enter it, they don't have to be, unless they want to, that could be a part of the discussion, what do they want?
Yeah.
And do we just want to pay, do we still want 24 hours, but we just don't want to have as much money dedicated to that, or are we interested in having additional hours of coverage that they could contract with, I guess it's
Well,
a pretty in-depth discussion.
I would just ask them to see what they would, what their ideas would be first, and,
Or if they're even willing,
or if they're even willing, just to see.
and that would give us a better idea what we're gonna have to do with our budget, because we're gonna have
Right.
things that we're gonna have to compensate for budget-wise.
Is it kind of a piecemeal approach, though? Because, there's been discussion about fire coverage as well, how we can address the fact that they own property in town that only the city citizens are the only ones funding that particular coverage. Do we want to look at it as the entire services that the city provides that we don't get compensation for because they have so much property off the tax roll? Or are we going to address each thing individually?
No, I see your point, it's probably best to do them both at the same time.
Are there any other services that we?
Whatever issues are there, I can't think of any right now.
Okay, water, sewer, those are all utility.
Those are
Power,
utilities.
those are utilities, so those are already paid for through the rate, it would be anything else that was on property taxes, which is emergency services. I don't know what else would be on property taxes.
Yeah, well, there's, a citizen brought this up. Apparently there's, speaking of sewer, there's a sewer main that runs to the industrial park that there's nothing connected to. But it's been put in, the infrastructure's there. And the citizen's feeling was that the port, we overbuilt the sewer plant on the understanding that that was going to be developed and all of the services there. And we paid for all of that service, but it's just sat there. So we have provided the ability of a huge sewer main to that property. We spent the money on it, we're still paying for it, but the port has never had any responsibility in paying for that investment that we made because they've never hooked up to it. A kind of something on the same line, if you have electrical service here in town and you use a lot of electricity, you pay for a peak charge, which is the highest amount of electricity you use over the course of a year, or a water main. If you have a big water main, you pay for that size of the main regardless of how much you use it. And I think, can you see the connection between those where we've provided the infrastructure, the big pipe and all of that to that property, even though it's never been connected to, we've still invested in that. It seems like there should be some responsibility for that infrastructure being there as far as compensation to the city.
I think there might be kind of an inverse relationship in terms of the more comprehensive you get, the less likely.
I agree. Actually, just as an example of an investment that the city's made, an additional investment that the city's made in infrastructure that serves port property. And this isn't it shouldn't be an adversarial thing. It's simply be one of the topics of discussion is, we've made investments in protecting property from fire, protecting it from, with police, invested in the infrastructure that serves the property, made these investments, and it's not their fault that they're not on the tax roll. It's simply the way things are. And there's other instances. One person brought up the city of Salem, where the majority of the property in Salem is owned by the state government, and they have an agreement between the city of Salem and the state government that they will fund the services that are provided by the city. They'll share in funding those, because without that agreement, it would be impossible to provide those services. And I think that's kind of the point we're getting to, is, you know, in the past, the port's been kind of shaky financially, and now it's our turn, I think, to be kind of shaky financially, and we gotta kind of balance things out, I think.
So maybe just see if they'll overall help with just a general thing, and then we would determine how to divvy that up.
I think the first thing would be to look at similar agreements, like the one in Salem, between the state and the city. I think that would be a good starting point to say, you know, they agree to pay so much per assessed, you know,
Yeah.
whatever, as compensation for the services that are provided. And it's not for nothing. I mean, we're not asking for money for nothing. We're asking for compensation for services that we pay to provide. And I mean, this discussion tonight is one of those things directly.
Right. I agree with that.
And I would agree with you that we're potentially opening a can of worms here, but I also agree though, is it may be a can of worms that needs to be opened up, and, you know, this may be a good time to open it up and have a discussion about it. But if we're gonna have it, we need to have a discussion. It needs to be a broad-based discussion. It can't be just, I don't believe it should be just one item. It should be a broad-based discussion. But I think we should get with I think maybe the council together with the board, and maybe initiate something. I think the council and the board may need to get together
Yeah, at some point,
and
you could
have a
have
discussion about this.
you could have a joint meeting
Yeah.
to talk about it as a workshop.
And I want to just sorry, Lance, but I just want to reiterate that this isn't intended as adversarial or anything like that.
Oh,
no,
It's
not
just
at all.
we're just simply stating the
It's not
facts, is
business.
that the services we're providing are getting more and more expensive and having a larger and larger impact on the city budget. And at some point, and I think we're to that point, there has to be a broad-based discussion about where all of the people that benefit from those services we provide help support them.
Did you have something else?
Yeah, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, I believe there's parallel processes happening here. There's a port election, which could change the makeup of the port commission. It almost seems like it will, based on people that were announced in the paper. So that's happening, sort of sidelined to any potential discussion we'd have with the current commission. Right, so that's parallel, and then we also have their budget and our budget. And that's, I agree with Mr. Carson, that becomes increasingly complex. You start having a discussion with a commission that's nearing the end of the term, and maybe they have a different take on it than the commission that exists after an election.
When's the election?
I think, is it May?
May?
Yeah. So,
Be a lot of moving pieces.
I agree with it, what Tom and Kevin are saying, a comprehensive look at it. But I wonder if a comprehensive look is even possible with all those parallel processes happening at the same time. To return to the topic of our discussion tonight, the law enforcement services agreement. Does anyone think it's worth taking that to court, given the, by itself, given the nature of these multiple processes happening?
I personally think it's one of those things, Lance, that if you don't start asking people about it and telling them and at least approaching them and getting them to think about it and to possibly consider it, it'll never happen. So I think we need to at least go and talk to them. I mean, it doesn't cost them anything to talk to us. They can always say no, and then we'll have to deal with everything the way we've been dealing with it. And it'll come down to a point where, when it comes to our budget, if we don't have the money, we'll have to cut something. And so I think it's a good idea. Do we need to have a motion to
Just a
have
consensus.
Richard check into it?
Just a consensus, we
Or
can't make motions.
consensus? Go ahead, Tom, I didn't mean to.
I agree with Lance here too. I have a consensus to look into this thing. But timing wise, right now, when I look into something, I don't mind, you know, it may take time. I have no problem with something taking time. But I agree with Lance is saying, hey, we got this thing on the table here right now, budget's here right now. And I think this is, and I agree that this may be something that takes time. I don't think we should approach them right now after this thing. I think we should do it right and do it in time and not go after them for part of this. We need to deal with this, with this contract, and then have a discussion, an ongoing discussion with them. But for right now, we need to deal with this and our budget and this, and not expect something's gonna happen there. Or even get into that, because I don't think we have time to get into that. That discussion may take a long time.
Yes, Lance?
No, suggestion was made, I think, in January that we have a joint port city council meeting. And I wondered if there's been any progress made on that, because maybe that's a place to start a discussion. Seemed like there was some interest from one, maybe two port commissioners on that, doing that. Has any progress been made on planning that?
I think I got lost in translation.
I don't know.
Well, no, in January, yeah.
Yeah.
So, is that a place to start it, or first have the conversation between Chuck and?
I think it should be a place to start. We could get Richard to schedule it for us. Did you have a question, Ethan?
I'm going back and forth.
Oh, okay.
Well, I would like to have some information on what other governments do in the same situation. How it works in Salem, or if others.
Specific to city versus port?
Just an example, yeah. I mean, this is what
they
these
do to
people
get
consider
funds
fair.
for
This is
ports.
what these people consider fair. So we at least have a starting point to just, you know, something to discuss with them. I mean, I think it's going to be a short conversation if we just say,
We want you to pay.
we want you to help, and they say, well, how much do you want us to help? Well, we have no idea what.
No idea, exactly.
Well, on that, there's lots of ports out there that are in lots of communities.
Right.
And I would assume there's gotta be a lot of variety of agreements between ports and communities.
Yeah.
Port of Portland has their own police force, their own fire department,
Yeah.
their own, right?
So it'd have to be something smaller.
So but I
Port of Morrow.
would bet that.
Port of Morrow?
I would bet that the Port of Hood River doesn't.
What about,
Yeah.
If I had to guess, I would bet that they don't pay.
what about the Dallas, maybe they?
Question.
Dallas is pretty active.
Well, I like all those ideas, and especially, you know, the idea of kind of growing in time there. And I'm wondering, I'm just trying to think about, because I know the budgets are tight and all that, whether maybe we can't move forward with what we have now. With what we have. Start our joint meetings, and then if there's some way, with the amount of hours that we have, 24, and then find out if there's some way, possibly, we already know how much is gonna come out of our budget. Maybe in the report, they might be able to go forward with something and maybe able to contribute this year, but if they can't, we already know what we've got. And then move into next year, you know, if they decided maybe what we wanna do next year, we can go, okay, well, now we wanna talk about more like, 45 hours or something like that, but I don't know if that's gonna have much impact on what we're doing right now with this short amount of time.
One thing that would be interesting to ask the sheriff is, how much time is he spending on port property? As opposed to, compared to what he's spending in the city?
Yeah,
No.
Fourth of July.
It would be like, I think, kind of like asking, well, how many fires do you have on port property? Well, you pay for the coverage, not for the particular
the
incident,
insurance,
right?
yeah.
You pay for the amount,
Yeah,
you pay for the fire department being there, not for the fact that your house is gonna be the one that's gonna catch on
Exactly.
fire.
I agree. So, we don't have a question asked.
Yeah.
I don't.
Okay, well,
And,
we're kind of,
well, the same thing here, we had a discussion with the sheriff last year over, hey, can we get this thing cut down with, and his thing is worth, you can cut it down, but the way you cut it down is you lose more. You can pay them less, but you're gonna lose more hours. That's where it's at, because there's so many things that are locked into, as they put it into, locked into all these different categories, and they're locked in. And so the only way you can get a savings on it is to go with fewer hours, so trying to get them to come down on this price will only cost you hours of time here.
Well, I thought in addition to that, it was also saying that if we cut the hours, we're gonna lose the position altogether.
That's true.
So it wasn't even, you can't even
Yeah.
save money that way.
Yeah, so it's tough.
Well, and then you're looking about only about what a 3% raise, so if you think about increases in costs of fuel, equipment, personnel price, whatever, I don't know that 3% is unreasonable.
Well, I think we're gonna have to table this until the next meeting to talk about it, as far as the contract,
Well, we
the
can't,
services,
we're just discussing it,
we're
that's all.
just discussing it.
Yeah, we
so.
can't make a motion on it.
Well, I'm
Anyways.
just saying that I think we need to have some input from Mary Ann, where we're gonna come up with the additional money that they're asking for, because right now, I think there's some real points here that everybody doesn't understand, that we might not have the money to do this, so. I think we need to get that from Mary Ann, because there might be things that are gonna be in the new budget cycle that we might not have the money, so, things might change. There's some other issues here that we just gotta wait and see what happens. The transit room tax thing might change entirely, which will change how much money is taken out and what's available for these kind of services. Because those figures are supposed to change. See what I'm saying? So,
Well, I think, I don't know when this doesn't have to happen until after budget anyway, right? This is just something that the county had to give to us by
right.
April 1st or whatever, or
Yeah,
our agreement is if you don't get this by April 1st, there is no raise, right? If you have a raise. So I assume we have time on this thing anyway.
yeah, so we didn't sign it until July last year, so
Yeah, it's just,
26.
it's the run-up for their budget.
Right.
They need to put it out on the table, because they're gonna start using this number in their budget.
They signed it July 19th, we signed it 26th.
So,
And
you have
that
more?
being said, so since the attorney hasn't called back, what are we gonna do with the city administrator?
Bring it back to next council meeting?
Either that, or you could, I'll just throw this out there, is tomorrow I could, and talk to the attorney, and if you wanna give me the power to make the decision. But
We'd have to come out of workshop in order to do that, yeah,
It's still gonna come up in that meeting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That would be nice to have more information, I would say.
yeah.
Can we still move forward and try and get some information? And what can it hurt, I guess, if we're gonna wait a little bit to go ahead and try to make contact?
Right.
So we're not warm up here with Bill.
With what are you talking
I'm
about?
talking about this,
Which,
I mean, the services thing.
the services in the port, yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Yeah, we should.
And then this week.
Well, I thought we just changed subjects to talk about the,
Yeah, I know we had,
Administrator
but she went,
contract.
she stepped back, so I think she
Oh,
was
okay.
discussing whether or not we should move forward with going ahead and coming up with information about what other ports do, and then scheduling a joint meeting somewhere and
We
start
don't have to
having,
make the decision right now.
yeah, and have this discussion, yeah. So I'd be okay with that,
I agree with that.
so.
Yeah, I agree with it.
Lance? Kevin? You do that for us, Richard?
I'm trying to figure out what you just did
Yeah, look into other communities, find out
first,
what they're,
before we go into a joint session.
Yeah, find out what they're
Sure,
doing, and
okay.
then figure out if the port's even
Right.
willing to have a joint meeting with us.
Well, something,
And
it certainly couldn't hurt to have the joint meeting just because you have a lot in common, a lot of things to talk about,
haven't
and
had
then
one
you're
for a
in the
long
budget
time.
cycle, so,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
And you may have some new port people you might want to talk to.
May,
Maybe his name does.
yeah, you never know. So, are we done?
Well,
Motion to
I'm
adjourn.
done with law enforcement.
Okay, so,
did someone just bring up the issue of the contract and what we're doing about that? Since we're not going to.
we can't do anything right now, so it's gonna come back to the next council
Well-
meeting
well,
for
the-
us to discuss.
Then my question is, are we continuing with the current practice of withholding
Taxes.
taxes, Social Security, Medicare, life insurance, death and membership, or whatever they were, all of those things that were listed as $343.90 every 2 weeks? Or are we going with what's in the contract where we weren't
Well,
planning on withholding?
I would suggest that since we're going to bring it back to the council with the city attorney here, the only thing I have to go by at the moment is what the city attorney has advised me is what legally we should do. So I would suggest that, we've already done it once, I mean, we might as well continue it until he sits down and tells you why, and you make a decision on what you want to do. Because like I said, I can't play attorney, so.
You pretty much got to do that.
Well, the discussion earlier was that
We-
by doing that, we've established an employer-employee relationship, which would then,
Yeah, we can say when we did that, and we can say we've done that for the period of time that we've employed him, but then we can also say in the future that that's changing to a personal contract
Right.
later on. But right now, I think we have to do according to what the lawyer suggested.
Eva had her hand
Pardon me?
up. Eva.
Eva?
I think that we entered into a contract. My understanding is it was gonna be over $7,500. And so, and that we were doing it as a contract thing. So my thought is that you can always give money. You can always give money too, does that make sense? So I would kind of like
I
to do it
guess.
the other way. I think that we should stick with the contract. And that's what I feel. We're talking, I mean, it may not seem like a lot of money, but it is, because we got, low on money.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm not sure we've actually approved those expenditures. I guess
Exactly.
it is still within city administrator's spending authority, but it almost,
Well, I'd have to look back to make sure, but I thought it was asked, the council said go ahead, but I'll have to go back and look.
You thought what? Was asked what?
I thought it was mentioned at one meeting, and I think Harry was sitting in the audience and explained the situation when it first came about. No?
that did not happen.
Okay, maybe it was internal, maybe not.
Well, in any case,
It was
usually,
on the agenda at the last meeting, it was pulled from the agenda. Nothing was said at that meeting. That's my recollection.
Okay, maybe
Could
it's
be wrong.
internal, maybe I'm thinking wrong.
Well, it's a substantial difference. The budgeted amount of the previous city administrator's salary was about $6,200 a month. I'm guessing, I'm not trying to be exact, but it was in that vicinity.
I don't know.
And then the additional $1,500 a month was what was set aside to pay for Social Security, all of those things, the insurance, unemployment. That's what that $1,500 was budgeted to pay for. But now we're in a situation where we're using the entire $7,500, and then we're also taking on an additional liability of paying for part of those other expenses. And that was, our intent was to pay the $7,500 and not have additional liabilities. I don't see any other way we can go. My opinion is we have a contract right now. I understand that there's some discussion about whether it's an appropriate contract or it can be, we can employ someone that way. We can't just simply say, oh, well, we can't do that, so now we're just gonna keep these dollar figures and then change it to an employee-employer relationship. If it's gonna change, if it has to change, then it's gonna change. But it can't simply just rotate on that simple relationship and then us also assume a higher liability because we haven't budgeted for it, for one thing. And that's really what the issue revolves around, was we tried to group all of the money that we had budgeted for that position and pay it as an independent contractor thing. And that was why, you know, what I think needs to happen is we need to reopen the contract negotiation. That's really where we need, if this isn't a valid contract, then it's not a valid contract, and then we need to have a valid contract. And that needs to
We'll have
address.
to do that with the lawyer and during executive session.
Yeah.
So,
But
all right.
that still doesn't answer the question, what happens? Are we still withholding, or are we not still withholding?
It never came before council for us to do it differently. I mean,
I agree.
It never came before council, so.
We haven't
I would
approved
say
those
that we should-
expenditures.
I agree.
That we should go with contract.
It shouldn't have happened.
It shouldn't have happened.
It shouldn't happen until it's approved by council.
I mean, I understand why it happened.
Yes.
I understand why it happened too, but
The attorney says it has to go one way, but council has to approve expenditures.
Exactly. And the attorney doesn't give direction, you know?
Yeah.
The attorney advises us and we give direction.
so.
Clear as mud?
My understanding is that until we take action to change it, we're going as independent, have an agreement as an independent contractor relationship. That's what I believe we've decided.
That was what our intent was.
Right.
So if I understand what you're saying, then the next payment should be handled as it's spelled out in the contract without deductions,
And actually,
all the other bells and whistles, and then it'll come back for you at your next meeting with an executive session to talk about it with the attorney and then discuss whether to reopen the contract.
I mean, my personal preference would be, and this is that the original paycheck be replaced with a contract paycheck that does not withhold taxes.
Now,
I know it's
I know how
a
that works,
semantic
but
thing, but it's the direction that was given.
Is it a constrained contract, or is it just a matter of
Well-
simply an in-house process where
well, the contract was very simple in that it said it's $7,500 a month paid twice. So 2 payments of $3,750, and that's all the contract said. There was nothing else in there. So if we revert back to the contract, then the next payment would be for a straight $3,750 with no deductions, nothing.
With the exception that it says, except for deductions that are required by law. If the attorney's saying, it says that in the contract, right? Got it here. Section 4, compensation, base salary. Shall not receive any other employee-provided benefits except those specifically required by law, including but not limited to workers' compensation coverage.
I don't know how that,
Contractor, then why not be anything required by law?
But
It doesn't say this deductions, it says benefits.
but that's a deduction.
benefits,
The benefit of Social Security, Medicare,
that's not,
unemployment benefit, life insurance benefit, disability benefit, accidental death and dismembership benefit.
If you're a contractor, that's not required by law for the city to pay. He has to pay that.
But the contract itself doesn't say anything, as far as I could find, didn't say anything about independent contractor. It was just our intent, but the contract itself didn't say that.
Well,
Regardless.
So in my mind, the council approved the monthly amount, did not approve anything above that monthly amount. The attorney's telling us legally we're required to withhold from that paycheck, so
the thing that,
how do we spend that money without having approved it?
the thing that I would say is that originally that the agreement that Richard had with us, with myself, was that he would get a flat rate of $7,500 a month.
And then I would, as personal income, I would pay my own social, my own state taxes.
The employer and the employee portion, you would have paid.
Well, yeah, let's just say whatever was required. In this, because as a contractor on my own, I wouldn't have to pick up a lot of things that you would have to do, like PERS or workers' comp. I would basically, as personal income, just pay my state and federal taxes. Because I don't employ anybody, so I don't have to have all of this.
But you would be responsible for, the employer pays 7.5%, the employee pays 7.5%. You would be responsible for the entire 15% as an independent contractor.
Yeah, I don't know.
And that entire amount would come out of the $7,500 a month.
Yeah, I don't know if I would even have to pay that because I would be taking it as income and not as, I don't even know if would fall under that. I mean, that's a whole separate thing about what I would have to pay, but the idea was I would pay whatever I had to pay.
Mhm.
Okay, can we adjourn? Make a motion to.
Have we made a decision about that?
Well, we can't make a decision.
Oh, yeah. Well, I would just say that we haven't changed the decision we previously made.
We haven't changed it. The only thing that's really changed was that he was advised by the lawyer to do something. And so now we're advising him that we're going back to what we had always did, and he needs to talk to the lawyer again.
We need to discuss this at the next council meeting.
Right.
So
We'll be able to
nothing's
address it.
changed.
Yeah, we'll address it.
There won't be any, the quarterly filings aren't due until April 15th, so we'll be able to address any of the withholding things prior to that going in, so there's no damage done either way.
So the next paycheck, no withholdings are made.
That's my understanding.
Is that what the council sees as the direction here?
Well, that's what the
We haven't
contract is,
changed
so
the
yeah.
contract, so that's where we're at.
Okay.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn.
Did you get a gavel?
You have it there, Tom,
It's right there.
Right there.
Tom, could